What's going on YouTube? It's your boy Afro coming back at you again with another video about another ethnic group in Africa. This one will probably be very familiar with you. They've been in a lot of videos, especially pertaining to the African slave trade, as well as they were instrumental in finding one of the most famous African empires in all of history. And this ethnic group is known as the Mandinka people, or Malinke, and we're gonna get right into it, okay? So essentially, the Mandinka people are a West African ethnic group primarily found in southern Mali, eastern Guinea, and northern Ivory Coast. Now, some slaves to the Americas came from like modern day Nigeria, the Congo region, and stuff like that. But a significant portion also came from the previous territories of Mali as well. Okay, so after going over like where they primarily reside, they actually number around 11 million people today, and they're actually one of the largest subgroups of the Mande people, and as a whole in Africa, they're also one of the largest ethno-linguistic groups in Africa in general. Okay, so they speak the Mandinka language, which is one of the Western Mandingo languages in the Mande language family, and and it's actually a lingua franca in much of West Africa as well. Over 99% of Mandinka adhere to Islam, and they are also predominantly subsistence farmers, and they live in rural villages. Their largest urban center being in the capital Bamako, which is also inhabited by closely related peoples known as the Bambara. So now we get into a little bit of their history and things of that nature, and their empire. So the Mandinka are the descendants of the Mali Empire, which rose to power in the 13th century under the rule of King Sunjata Keita, who founded an empire that would go on to span a large part of West Africa. And it's good to note that he was actually a slave, or he was actually exiled, I would say, from his empire. After like he couldn't really walk that well. He was actually made fun of by his family, and he was sent away. However, he learned how to walk eventually, gained strength, and that was around the time he was sent away because his family, would obviously try to target him. His mother knew he wasn't safe, so she hauled butt with him back to some other person who she knew could keep him safe and stuff like that. But unfortunately, I guess in regards to the rise of the Mali Empire, what happened was there was a guy named Samar Kante that was being a jerk to everybody pretty much, and he basically gathered an army, united countless tribes against this one dude, conquered the entire I would say remnants of the Ghana Empire, which came before the Mali Empire and lasted a significant chunk, but was destroyed by the rise of the Almoravid Empire. And they essentially, after that, Mali was essentially born. Okay, so Sunjata Keita was the founder of the empire. Okay, so they essentially migrated west from the Niger River in search of better agricultural land and more opportunities for conquest. Okay, so they originally came from the Niger River and they migrated west, okay, in search of better agricultural lands and more opportunities, like I said. Nowadays, the Mandinka inhabited the West Sudanian Savannah region, extended from Gambia and Casamance region in Senegal to the Ivory Coast. Okay, so you probably hear Sudan a lot. Like, Sudan is actually a country in Africa. Sudan means land of the blacks, and it's often what Arabs will refer to as the lands beneath the Sahara. You know what I'm saying? That's what they would call black people, or the land they lived in. Like, originally it was Bilad al Sudan, the Arabic connotation meaning land of the blacks, basically. But the region essentially of the Western Sudan Savannah extended from the Gambia and the Casamance region in Senegal to the Ivory Coast. Although widespread, the Mandinka constitute the largest ethnic group only in the countries of Mali, Guinea, and the Gambia. Most Mandinka live in family-related compounds in traditional rural villages. So their traditional society has featured socially stratified castes. Mandinka communities have been fairly autonomous and self-ruled, being led by a chief and a group of elders. Mandinka has been an oral society where mythologies, histories, and knowledge are verbally transmitted from one generation to the next. Their music and literary traditions are preserved by a caste of griots, or storytellers, or oracles, storytellers, known locally as jealous. Okay, so that's what they call their griots or storytellers, as well as guilds, and brotherhoods like the Danso or hunters. So between the 16th and 19th century, many Muslims and non-Muslim Mandinka people along the numerous other African ethnic groups were captured, enslaved, and shipped to the Americas. Like I said before, like they were one of the main people traded as slaves. And one can argue that that's primarily the reason why the Mali Empire fell, because like the population was very depopulated because of the slave trade. Okay, so yeah, I guess like that's something people should mention. Although like slavery was different in Africa, like people were being traded as slaves. It wasn't just like, you know, it was being traded. People were being traded as slaves. Like if it did happen, like most like European slave rates probably was very little. Let's be honest, and like, you know, people were being sold. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you have to put it in context, of course. You know, it's not like they had any prisons, so like their prisoners of war would often be sold as slaves. That's how it was. But yeah, people were sold. You know, it's a fact. But they intermixed with slaves and workers of other ethnicities, creating a Creole culture. Okay, and the Mandinka people significantly influenced the African heritage of descendant peoples now found in Brazil, the southern United States, and to a lesser extent, the Caribbean. Like to a lesser extent in the Caribbean, because the Caribbean, I believe most people came from significantly around the Nigerian region, like even Haitians to this day, and in their language you'll find a lot of Igbo descendant languages and culture. So that's, yeah. But moving forward, as far as their history goes, the history of the Mandinka people started in Manding region. Manding region is between southern Mali and the Guinea. So from hunters from Ouagadougou or the Ghana Empire founded Mandan, the Mandingo country, in particular the mythical ancestor of Contran and Sanin. At the origins of the Malinke and Bambara hunter brotherhood, this country was famous for the largest number of animals and game that it sheltered, as well as its dense vegetation and a very popular hunting ground. The Camara are expected to be the oldest family to have lived in Mandan. After having left due to the drought, Olata, a region of Ouagadougou in the southeast of present-day Mauritania, they founded the first village of Manding, Kirakorini. They then called Kirini, Sibi, and Kita. A very large number of families that make up the Mandinka community were born in Mandan. Manding is a province from which the Mali Empire started. Okay, so and just to let you know, the Mali, at first the language, the word translates something to hippo, something like that. That's what the word meant, but then it later changed into just being like the word where the king lives. Okay, so the Mandan were initially a part of a fragmented kingdoms that formed after the collapse of the Ghana Empire in the 11th century. So remember, the Ghana Empire collapsed because of the invasion of the Almoravids, right? And during the rule of Sunjata Keita, these kingdoms were consolidated, and the Mandinka expanded west from the Niger River basin under Sunjata's general Tiramakan Traoré, and this expansion was a part of creating a region of conquest. According to the oral traditions of the Mandinka people, this migration began in the later part of the 13th century. Another group of Mandinka people under Faron Kamara, the son of the king Tabu, expanded the southeast of Mali, while a third group expanded with Fokali Kuruma. With the migration, many gold artisans and metalworking Mandinka smiths settled along the coast and in the hilly Futa, Djalan, and plateau areas of West Africa. Their presence and products attracted Mandinka merchants and brought trading caravans from North Africa and the Eastern Sahel. So states Tobu Green, a professor of African history and culture, it also brought conflicts with other ethnic groups, though, such as the Wolof people who inhabit modern-day Senegal and were essentially like the Jollof Empire, the Wolof people of particularly the Jollof Empire. The caravan trade to North Africa and the Middle East brought Islamic people into Mandinka people's original and expanded home region. The Muslim traders sought presence in the host of Mandinka community, and this likely initiated proselytizing efforts to convert the Mandinka from their traditional religious beliefs into Islam. In Ghana, for example, the Almoravids had divided its capital into two parts by 1077. One part was Muslim and the other non-Muslim. The Muslim influence from North Africa had arrived in the Mandinka region before this, via Islamic trading diasporas and things of that nature. In 1323, Mansa Musa, I already made a video about this, go ahead and check him out. Mansa Musa, who ruled Mali, went on to Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca with a caravan carrying gold. Shihab al-Amari, the Arabic historian, described his visit and stated that Musa built mosques in his kingdom, established Islamic prayers, and took back Maliki school of Sunni jurists with him. So like Sufi jurists, basically. The Maliki fall under like a Sufi branch of Sunni Islam. According to Richard Turner, a professor of African American religious history, Musa was highly influential in attracting North African and Middle Eastern Muslims to West Africa. The Mandinka people of Mali converted early, but those who migrated to West did not convert and retained their traditional religious rites. One of the legends among the Mandinka of Western Africa is that General Turmakan Chur led the migration people into Mali had converted to Islam, and he did not want to. Okay. Another legend gives a contrasting account and states that Traoré himself had converted and married Muhammad's granddaughter. Interesting. But the Traoré's marriage with Muhammad's granddaughter, states Toby Green, is fanciful, but these conflicting oral histories suggest that Islam had arrived well before 13th century and had a complex interaction with the Mandinka people. Complex is definitely like the good word for it, because like Islam didn't just spread by the sword in West Africa. I would say that was primarily in North Africa, but to a certain extent it kind of did spread by the sword. Like, you know, the Almoravid invasion of the Ghana Empire was a perfect example. But there are other times where, like, you know, like Islam just came through camelback caravans. Like, you know, people there carry their Quran with them on camelback and simply give it to like the people, and they'll often convert them. Okay, so there is like, it's complex, but through a series of conflicts, primarily with the Fula-led jihads under Ibamat of Futa Jalon, so the Fulani people, many Mandinka converted to Islam. In contemporary West Africa, the Mandinka are predominantly Muslim, with a few regions where significant portions of the population are not Muslim, such as Guinea-Bissau, where 35% of the Mandinka practice Islam, more than 20% are Christian, and 50% follow traditional beliefs. So slavery. Slave raiding, capture, and trading in Mandinka regions may have existed in significant numbers before the European colonial era As evidenced in the memoirs of 14th century Moroccan traveler and Islamic historian Ibn Battuta, slaves were part of the social stratified Mandinka people, and several Mandinka languages, words such as Jongo refer to slaves. There were 14 Mandinka kingdoms along the Gambia River in Senegambia region during the early 19th century. For example, where slaves were a part of the social strata in all these kingdoms. According to Toby Green, selling slaves along with gold was already a significant part of the trans-Saharan caravan trade across the Sahel between the West Africa and the Middle East after 13th century. With the arrival of the Portuguese explorers in Africa, as they looked for a sea route to India, the Europeans' purchase of slaves had begun. The shipments of slaves by the Portuguese, primarily from the Jollof people, along with the same Mandinka, started in the 15th century. Around, obviously, the Christopher Columbus founded, like, you know, the New World and all that. So, states Green, but the earliest evidence of trade involving Mandinka slaves is from and after 1497 CE, in parallel with the start of the transatlantic slave trade. Okay, so the institution of slavery and slave trading of West Africans into the Mediterranean region and inside Africa continued as a historic normal practice. Slavery grew significantly between the 16th and 19th century. And the Portuguese considered slave sources in Guinea and Senegambia part of Mandinka territory as belonging to them. So yeah, in the 16th to 18th centuries, slave trade related to documents referring to our Guinea and complaining about slave traders from other European nations superseding them in the slave trade. Okay, so yeah, I mean, 99% of the Mandinka are Muslim, and yeah, I mean, like, so like I would say like the Mandinka like are one of the main people in Africa that deserve the most respect. Just like with the most other African countries, they have a dark history with slavery, but like, you know, a lot of slavery was practiced by a lot of groups throughout the years, throughout human existence. You know, it's just what it was. But they were instrumental in the founding of the Mali Empire and producing one of the most famous kings in all of history. So go check out my other video about Mansa Musa, the richest man in history. And honestly, listen, if you guys have any other ideas of any other African ethnic group you want to see, please leave it in the comments below. Leave a like, comment, and please subscribe. Also follow my Patreon and my other social media below in the description section. And other than that, I hope you guys take care and come back for my next video, which will be about the Islamic slave trade, or yeah, the Islamic slave trade or trans-Saharan East African slave trade, just because I feel like it's a part of history that it's history. It should be talked about, but it's not talked about at all. So that's what we're gonna go over in my next video. I'll see you guys later. Bye bye.